West Virginia fans, BYU fans, Utah fans, a lot of Big 12 fans are up in arms over a rivalry game. What are we talking about here? Rivalry games. What is going on with Scott Dochterman of The Athletic not putting these teams higher on his list of the top 100 college football rivals? Well, we're going to find out in this episode of Couz Corner because we're going straight to the source. Mr. Dochterman will be joining the show, and he's going to explain his reasoning behind his rankings. We'll talk about some of these rivalries that may have been lower on his list than expected by us Big 12 fans. And we'll have that conversation with Mr. Dochterman right now. What is up, Mr. Dochterman? How you doing?
I'm doing well. How's it going today? It's been a wild day, that's for sure.
It has been. And first off, thank you very much for coming on the show and agreeing to do this.
Yeah, you bet. I'm glad to talk about it. I know it was a hot button topic, and I'd like to kind of lower the temperature, explain, and then make sure that I don't think we'll find common ground, maybe, or
that's okay.
People, but that's okay. It's college football, and it's fun to talk about it no matter what.
That's right. It's fun to debate. It's fun to sometimes argue, sometimes disagree, and sometimes we have to agree to disagree, right? There's nothing wrong with that. So, but yeah, before we get into some of these specific rivalries, and obviously me being a West Virginia guy, we're going to talk about the Backyard Brawl, but we'll get to that in a minute. Just can you give the listeners and the viewers a little overview of your criteria, what went into deciding this? And for those who don't know what we're talking about, is Scott put out a list of his top 100 college football rivalries. And the Backyard Brawl, for example, was rated number 26. The Territorial Cup between Arizona and Arizona State was 54. Holy War was rated at 28. So none of these made the top 25. But we'll talk about those individual rivalries in a minute. But just give us a little bit of an idea of, Scott, of what went into your criteria, what was your thinking behind these lists, and what made you decide to put teams where you put them.
Yeah, thanks for the intro. And here's kind of how it started and how I got into it. It was back in March. We started discussing, okay, you get to the summertime, you kind of want to do something different, bigger. And we've had some of these top 25 of 25 countdowns on different stories. And this one, we wanted to go a little bit deeper into rivalries. And I'm like, I'm game, what do we want to do? And they're like, well, let's do the top 100 of them. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty daunting, but let me get into it. And so in March, I started researching every single one of them. Of course, with realignment, it's been a little more challenging to try to figure out where does everybody fit in the world. And then I start throwing in FCS, G5, D2, D3, all the way down, and putting them kind of in this big pot. And there's probably about 150 of them that I started really examining over years, and including some other ones for West Virginia, whether it was with Penn State and Maryland. I looked at just Syracuse, just some of the old ones from the Big East or the eastern part of the world, and then when I started to rank them, it wasn't that difficult. I started at 100 as opposed to 1. I kind of got my list of 100 and then went from the bottom up because I thought that made more sense for me as I was doing it, because then as I got closer to the top, I could kind of be a little more energized probably to do a few of those games, as opposed to, no offense, but Wake Forest, NC State didn't quite, when it's the 9, I ranked it at 86. If I'm writing it as the 86th one in a row, that'd probably be a little tedious. But as I started to go and started to straighten it out, it got more and more challenging, as you can imagine. When I got to probably the mid 30s, and I'll say from 35 to about 15, 14 was where it kind of bogged down for me, because you're looking at all of these great rivalries have real similar characteristics. They're either in-state rivalries or they're border state rivalries. Incredibly passionate. They've been played a long time. The fan bases are just, this is the Super Bowl for them in some ways. And with that, and a lot of them have outstanding either nicknames or trophies. So that kind of goes into, it feeds the aura of these rivalries. So when I started out at like 35 was Baylor TCU. I mean, that's a rivalry that's been played 120 times, and they have their own characteristics. they're in the Big 12 now. They were in the Southwest Conference forever, and kind of moving my way up. When you get into Iowa State, Georgia Tech, that's the clean old fashioned hate, Cyhawk, the Apple Cup. You have the Civil War, you have the game, you have the Holy War, you have the Backyard Brawl, you have Bedlam, you have the Egg Bowl, you have all these names with all these games with names, and each one in that region, each one in that state is the biggest game of the year. And a lot of them are in places, I mean, Pittsburgh's obviously different, but a lot of them are in places where there isn't another sports team, Iowa State or the Oregon teams. There's no pro football in that area. So this is a game that everybody wraps their arms around and celebrates, but also is very competitive. And sometimes it's a really cool celebration, and other times it gets really rowdy and messy. So I figured once I got to about, again, 35-ish, all the way into where you're getting about to 14 or 15, I got to find ways to differentiate them. I'm not going to rank them based on their cool nicknames. And all of them have played, I mean, going down the list here, the Egg Bowl's been played 121 times, Clemson, South Carolina, 121 times, Bedlam, 128, the Backyard Brawl, 107, 128 for, and so all of them have been played 100 times. So how do you differentiate them? When I'm looking at it from a 20,000 foot view, not just, because the Holy War is crazy in Utah. The Backyard Brawl is crazy. We can all agree to that, but how do I get it to where it's in some sort of workable order without being, a milquetoast and just say, what, I'm not going to rank them now. I'm just going to sit there and say, these are all great rivalries. Nobody wants that. So I really started to ask myself, okay, here are 11 principles and questions I'm going to go through. And not one is taking precedent, but all of them figure into the final tally. Data. What do the numbers say? How many times have they met as ranked opponents? What is the win-loss disparity? And when you go through some of that is, like the Holy War, they've only met 3 times as ranked opponents, which kind of tells you it's a hyper-local, intense rivalry. But how often does the meaning of that rivalry spill over and make it important on a broader scale? Not as much. I'm not dismissing the passion, because the passion's the same everywhere. Likewise, Iowa State on my list was higher until I looked into it. Iowa State's been ranked once for the Cyhawk. And, so at that point, you're like, well, how does that compare with, take your pick, Michigan State, where they've been combined like 16 times or more. That's really hard to do. And then I started going in other areas. Prominence. How often does this involve high profile programs? What is this the type of game that all of a sudden it's like the networks go, okay, this is our primetime game on ABC, or this is our primetime game on, or noon kickoff on Fox, something like that. Trajectory was important to me in a lot of ways. That is this series growing or retracting in importance? Are the programs on equal playing levels? And one that's kind of in that same ballpark, I would say Pitt Penn State forever had a great series, but then when it ended, when Penn State left, they're not on the same playing field. I mean, Penn State is a more national power. Pitt hasn't reached that level. Frequency, and this is probably a little bit of an area why the Backyard Brawl went down maybe a couple of spots that maybe you'd think, and is this an annual series? Do they work to keep it on the schedule? Do the teams compete on the same weekend every year? And when I measured it all out, and again, these are so razor thin, I'm just really splitting hairs. I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between having the Backyard Brawl at 20 versus having it at 30 versus having it at 26. But the things that kind of took me down a little bit was when they split and when they left the Big East and West Virginia went to the Big 12 and Pitt went to the ACC. They had about a decade where they didn't play each other. And so even though this is a hyper intense battle every single time they play, and it's one that we all talk about, for 10 years it wasn't important enough to try to work in the schedule. And I know there's trying and there's not working, but it didn't happen. Whereas Georgia Tech doesn't have that problem. Clemson, South Carolina, Iowa State, they all play every year. Then, then there's the competitiveness, which again is challenging. And I'll give you the most difficult one of all for me, which was Bedlam. There was no other one that was more difficult for me than Bedlam, because they've been ranked twice, 19 times. So that's way beyond most, even in the top, everything outside the top 15.
Mm-hmm.
But the disparity is 91 to 20.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of hammer and a nail. So with Pitt and West Virginia, and this is where the Holy War kind of fell too. But which the Holy War and Stanford and Cal, they've only had 3 ranked battles.
Wow.
That West Virginia have only had 6. So, and then they've only involved at least one ranked team 20 times, which was really low compared to just about everybody else.
Out of 107 meetings, that's less than 20%.
Right. And so to grade it on, say, passion, intensity, those are difficult intangibles to quantify, because it's the Holy War is crazy too, and the Cyhawks crazy, and they're fighting the band when they're marching through, and and the Holy, so you got the Civil War and you got the Backyard Brawl. So that's why I had to bring those in, and then there were a few that fell, and this one probably went from about 20 to 26, just simply because I'm like 6 times they were ranked, 20 featured only one ranked team, whereas you got Washington and Oregon, which I think is on a trajectory upward. 10 times they were double ranked. 52 times at least one team was ranked. Twice they were in the top 10 together. And whereas there's never been a top 10 battle for the Backyard Brawl. So that's kind of the gist of how I put this all together. And so, I don't expect everybody to agree. And I know that sometimes it can sound like, hey, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I'm not going to use one overlying criteria. But I think in this case, I elevated over some other rivalries that I thought were pretty good too, which would be the Apple Cup and Civil War and the Holy War, for that matter, the game between Stanford and Cal and the Cyhawk. I mean, so it got a lot of love and a lot of respect. It was just, when you get down to it, if you're picking Miss America, you gotta, all of them are beautiful, but how do you pick which one's going to win it?
Yeah.
It's kind of this situation.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think as fans, we have a tendency to get caught up in the passion of the game, how much we care about the game, hatred towards the other fan base, banter on social media. But you made a great point. How do you put a number on that? How do you rank something like that, right? How do you put a number on how many fans? Because not all fans are on social media.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you clarified that, because I'm a fan as well. So I look at this going, wait a minute. But I have to sit back and, like you, 20,000-foot view, and try to look at it from an analytical perspective. So I'm glad you brought that to our attention. You had, so the Backyard Brawl, just to make sure I'm clear, them not playing for 10 years hurt their score a little bit, and then also the fact that they haven't been ranked a ton. And when you look at that, what makes that rivalry interesting is when you look at the trajectory of those two programs over the years. When Pitt was really good, typically West Virginia wasn't.
Yeah.
And vice versa, right? So, and that's hurt that ranking a little bit. Even if you go back to the 2007 game when Pitt pulled the big upset, Pitt wasn't ranked. They had a losing record at that point. So, even though that might be their biggest win in that series or in that rivalry, they weren't even ranked at the time. So that game doesn't really even help with the score in your exercise, right?
Yeah. Yeah, when you look at these games and then I also use moments. Is there something that stands out? I mean, frankly, you look at Cal and Stanford. If you take away the play back in 1982, all the laterals and the bands out on the field, you take that away, it could be 60th. I mean, they just played a lot, and they're in the same area, and it's hyper local, and it's really important to them. And they get average about 20,000 more fans per game when they play each other versus everybody else. But there's nothing. It's Kansas State, for that matter. It's just kind of in that, it's just a game, that it's important to those fan bases. But it had this one incredible moment that kind of vaults it up and keeps it up there in the public's consciousness. And with Pitt, West Virginia, you look primarily at They played a lot of really close games. It's been crazy the last few years. I've really enjoyed watching them, no question about it. And then the 07 upset really stands out, but it, was there ever going to be, even like Kansas, Missouri in 07, it was a 2-4 game at Arrowhead. And frankly, I'm glad it was cold that night because I've worked in that area for a while, and those are two fan bases that never should mix when it's really important. They do much better when it's 3 and 8 versus 4 and 7, and because basketball can get pretty nasty between those two. But every single one of those have those kind of moments, and then there's kind of the non-conference factor, which it did play a little bit into some of these, but not entirely. I mean, I would say like Georgia Tech. It's like through the 70s, Georgia Tech was the better team. From the last 50 years, it's been Georgia. Georgia Tech is kind of a little brother and that type of thing. And nobody wants to hear that, but it's true. And so you got a non-conference factor. How much does it really matter in the grand scheme, other than to those fan bases? That's what another thing you kind of have to judge. And then those, did they ever have a winner take all game to go to this bowl, to the playoff, to whatever? So all of that, is figured it in. And I know there are some rivalries that people have pointed out, like I had Minnesota, Wisconsin 10th, and people wonder, well, how's that? And I had some people tweet me, hey, how is this, this can't be crazier than that. Well, no, it is. It's a nightmare. When they play, they have a border war series, and they have one of the more iconic trophies, and they played more than anybody else, any other two teams in the college football, and it's tied.
I was going to say it's dead even, 63 to 8.
Yes. So you look at that and the moments that they've had, which again, not I would say competitively, the numbers are similar to that of Pitt, West Virginia. But it hasn't been interrupted. The only reason why it was interrupted since 1890 was because Teddy Roosevelt canceled the 1906 game. Right. They have had winner-take-all games to go win divisions, to go to the playoffs, go to the Rose Bowl and stuff in the past. Probably two that people are a little wondering about would be Washington, Oregon, Iowa, Wisconsin. Well, with Washington, Oregon in particular, 2 years ago, they played 2 games that were among the best, and then they've also had 10 games where they both have been ranked 52 times. At least one team's ranked. One was in the championship 2 years ago. The other one was ranked number 1 all year last year. Now they're an end of season game. And if you were to ask those fan bases out there that their in-state rivalry is important to them, but the one they kind of hated was Washington, Oregon. So when they both now go to the Big Ten, they're going to play last every year. I think that's got a real trajectory. And Iowa, Wisconsin, they're only 2.5 hours apart. They've won 7 out of the 10 Big Ten West titles. They've had 9 double-ranked games. The series is 49, 47, and 2. They've had, I think, a combined 12 double-digit winning seasons. It's got a real identity. They play for real territory, and every single year, and it's a protected series in the Big Ten. It's one of the 12 that were made powers. So, and again, reasonable people can disagree. They could say, look, I think the Backyard Brawl, the passion is, supersedes that. I'm not going to disagree. This is just the way I aligned it, because I felt like there needed to be something to lay over the top than just comparing passion, because that's so subjective.
Right.
Maybe you're there in a good year, maybe you're there in a bad year. Maybe one year one team was good and one team was bad, and you're there and you're like, or it rained and the atmosphere sucked. So you just got all these factors. So again, I don't know if I'm just hoping that people kind of respect or understand that this wasn't just I'm going to put this down and write it down and move on with it.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for that explanation. The one I'm looking at right now that really makes me scratch my head, Scott, is it fair to say that brand played a part, and maybe you've already covered this, that brand played a part in your rankings? Because I'm looking here at number 8, Ohio State, Penn State. Penn State's kind of known for not having a true rival.
Yeah. Unrivaled.
They've only met 40 times, but yet you have them as the number 8 rivalry game.
Yes.
Is it fair to say it's because it's against Ohio State and they're both in the Big Ten?
No. And here's why. And this is why it went where it did.
Okay.
I originally had it in the low teens, like 18, 19 range.
Mm-hmm.
They've only played 40 times, but here's where the numbers took them to a level where I'm like, okay, I got to really reevaluate this. And I went through, and I already knew about it, but really studied it. And that was, out of the 39 of those games have taken place since the rankings were instituted in 1936. 37 of them involved at least one ranked team. 25 involved two ranked teams.
Okay.
And 12 top 10 matchups, which
Okay.
was among the highest. So these games really matter, and they've mattered, over a 30-year period. Basically, they only played a couple of times before Penn State joined the Big Ten. Now there's a little disparity, which is probably why
Mm-hmm.
it didn't jump up into the top 6 or so.
Mm-hmm.
And Penn State's inability to beat Ohio State seemingly ever,
Yeah.
it also keeps it down a little bit. But it's hard to ignore when, out of 39 basically potential ranked matchups, 25 both of them were, and only 2 games out of that nobody was ranked. That's pretty strong. So the percentage, if you do it that way, it's like that's up there. But yeah, I respect it, and I know, again, I had it lower, and like I had Texas A&M higher, but the numbers
Mm-hmm.
kind of moved it down. But when you start talking about percentages, it's as high a percentage of really important games they played over and over again. And they're one of the very few teams, because they played during COVID, and Michigan and Ohio State didn't play during COVID, and that's one of the very few from the Big Ten that's remained straight on since Penn State joined the Big Ten.
Yep. Well, thanks for that explanation. I think you've really laid out your criteria really well, and explained why you did what you did and why you put teams and games where you put them. So I appreciate that clarity. We could sit here all day and banter back and forth about who should be where and why, but at the end of the day, it was your list, your ranking, and I respect that you stuck with your guns and you stuck with your criteria and didn't waver from that. So let's change gears a minute, if you don't mind, and let's talk
Sure.
a little on the field stuff.
Okay.
By the way, reminder for those of you listening, I'm talking with Scott Dochterman with The Athletic. Thank him for coming on the show. But Scott, I'd like to get everyone's opinion on this. The return of Rich Rod is a big deal here at West Virginia. What, from a national perspective, as someone who covers national or college football on a national level, what are your thoughts about the return of Rich Rod? Did you like the move? Did you not like the move? What are your overall thoughts on it?
I honestly, I did. Once I thought about it, I liked it. And I think it's obviously a full circle moment, because
Mm-hmm.
there was no more exciting team than when you had Pat White and Steve Slayton and some of the players that back in 20 years ago in that, 06, 07, 08 era, or, when he was there before he left for Michigan. And, he's kind of lost his way. Michigan obviously didn't work out for him. He went to Arizona. He had some, issues, and I don't know really how far to go into that. I'm not going to, and then he kind of worked his way up. Basketball coaches have these similar trajectories, but I think also with West Virginia, that going to the Big 12, where it was really a geographical outlier for so long, and you kind of want to build it back to what it was when it was at its height, bring back a familiar face, somebody who not only he was part of a real offensive juggernaut and change on offense that people have tried to follow. And now you bring him back, and it's kind of like, all right, the past is the past. Let's move on to the future. In this league that West Virginia is capable of being competitive. I think, I've talked to Iowa State people a lot, Kansas State people a lot, and they see real opportunity without Texas and Oklahoma. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
those two teams with that kind of resources and history, it's hard to get past that. Now everybody's kind of looking eye level. Like, now it's up to us to win. It's not because, well, they just have more resources and they have this.
Right.
And I think, having Rich Rod back in, I don't sense from the people I talk to a lot that it's not like it's not people aren't going to be dogging him because you took him. I can't believe he did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think likewise for him, this is a really smart move. I think it's a good way for him to end his career. He's kind of been a vagabond, if you will, since left West Virginia. He's bounced around. He probably thought, man, I can't believe I didn't go to Alabama. I can, didn't do all this right. Now he's got a chance to kind of finish at the place where he, took that next step and took that level back in the day. And I like it, and I hope that it works out. And and there's some really things that I see in the future that I think could really benefit West Virginia with him, not only kind of building an offense that people are going to be nervous about on a game in, game out basis, but now there's a little bit more regionality. You got Cincinnati, and I did another story, by the way, that I put 6 rivalries that could blossom out of this era, and I put Cincinnati, West Virginia as one of the 6 because hey, you're kind of in the same neighborhood, and that's good for you. And maybe this is me with my tinfoil cap on here a little bit, but I also think it would be really smart is if the ACC and the Big 12 had some sort of a scheduling agreement.
Yep, I agree.
and maybe it kind of get SMU playing the Texas schools, get West Virginia playing Pitt, Syracuse. A few of the other ACC teams with regularity. I mean, it'd be great for everybody. And then they could work together, and then they could kind of mount the, as an association, kind of a be on the same level or similar level to the Big Ten and SEC when it comes to these types of things. But I digress with all of that. I really like Rich Rod's hire. I think he's got a chance to surprise some people this year. I wouldn't predict like a championship or anything, but I think getting to a bowl game, making people aware of West Virginia, watching West Virginia, thinking, okay, Rich Rod's back and they've got an exciting offense. And then maybe the offseason you hit the portal and, get the right guys. And next thing you know, next year, you're right in striking distance because this league is going to be up for grabs every year. I rarely see somebody just coming in and going 9-0 and then winning the championship. It's going to be, there'll be a lot of years, I think, where 2 losses will still get you in the championship game.
Hey, do me a favor. Go check out my good friends over at Appalachia Digital. If you need a brand new website for your small business, or if you're just looking to get found easier on Google, go check out AppalachiaDigital.com/Couz. These are the fine folks who designed my brand new website over at WVSportsChat.com. They did a fantastic job. I love their work. I think you will too. So go check them out. AppalachiaDigital.com/Couz. Let them know Couz sent you. Now let's get back to the show. What were your thoughts on the Big 12 not doing a media poll this year?
Well, it's weak. I don't get it. Do it. What does it hurt? Somebody's feelings? Well, we're in football. Don't worry about your feelings. So I think it's ridiculous not to do that. And now, I know it's I don't know if this is a response to Arizona State being picked 16th and then winning it or whatever. But that makes for a good story, right? I mean, something they can lean into. And if West Virginia's picked 14th and goes to the Big 12 championship, what a great story. I just don't know why conferences get nervous about stuff like that.
Yeah.
The Big Ten is as bad as anybody about it. They'll say, like, who are the players to watch? And they'll put, like, they used to do, like, 5 from each division. And it's like, what are we doing here? Why can't we just do a preseason team? So
yeah, they don't do it either, do they? They don't do a preseason media poll either, do they?
No, we do our own, in the Big Ten because I covered the Big Ten for a long time. And so, I think that I don't know why people just chicken out. It's just a poll. Yeah. It's just a polls.
I'm going to give you my theory on why I think they probably did not do it.
Okay.
I was like you at first. I'm like, man, well, anytime somebody's talking about your league, to me, that's a good thing, right? You need the press, you need the media attention, especially the Big 12, who's trying to catch up with the P2, right? But I think if you look at the Big 12, at least from a lot of the fan base's perspective, feels like they're perceived as a weaker league than they actually are. And I think the parity that's in the conference sometimes can actually hurt the conference from a national perception perspective. And if you get a team who's ranked in the preseason very low, then that team kind of starts off behind the 8 ball. Well, that might end up being the team that could make it to the college football playoff at the end of the year. And if they started off behind the 8 ball, then I think it hurt in their mind. It might hurt the league overall, the perception of the league overall, which might make it harder for them to get 2 teams in the playoff. That's just my that's just my, I guess, theory of why they didn't do it. I've not heard that from anybody. That's just kind of what I'm thinking. What are your thoughts to that?
Oh, it's totally plausible. I know most marketing people within leagues tend to be nervous about stuff like that. They don't want to paint anybody in a bad light, so they just prefer, well, let's just not do it if it's going to paint somebody in a bad light, or and you're like, come on, it's football. It's something to talk about. It's something interesting. I can see though, there is always, and this is the one sport where perception matters versus everybody else. I mean, basketball, it works itself out. In the pro levels, it doesn't even matter. So this is the one sport where perception matters, where you're ranked, how people rank you, how people view you, how people view your league, and the Big Ten's the worst at it, and I think the SEC is the best at it, and the other two leagues are still kind of punching their way through, but both of them are better than the Big Ten at it. And I think in this situation, it's understandable, but you just kind of feel like, maybe it's like with the Big Ten, what we've done in several years is we're just going to have our own media poll, and everybody will cite it, and we'll all vote for it, and do it that way as opposed to mandated. But I think the Big 12 is missing out on an opportunity because they could brand it, they could probably sponsor it.
Well, I mean, from looking at it from West Virginia perspective, actually, because they would have likely been picked very low this year because of all the roster turnover. So I actually think it would have benefited them because it's something they could have hung on a bulletin board, use as much, just like they did 2 years ago.
Right.
When they made the big thing, Neil Brown made the big deal out of it at media days, and he was truly ticked off about it. And they used that as a rallying cry for they even had it on their shirts underneath their jerseys, the number 14. I mean, they were ticked off. And they used that, and they went out and finished fourth place in the conference, won 9 games. I could see something similar potentially happening. So I actually thought it would have been good for the team I talk about. But I guess the conference as a whole didn't see it that way, and they looked at it as, hey, we don't need this bad, quote-unquote, bad light being shined on our league. And I don't know. I'm with you. I kind of see it both. I kind of see both sides of it because I am a fan, but I also see it from an analytical perspective too as to why you wouldn't want to do it. So I don't know, or why you would want to do it rather. Why you want your league to be talked about and why you would want the media to cover it. So
sure. Now let me ask you a question about the playoff proposals in the future. Yep. The Big 12 has come out. The ACC has come out being proponents of 5+11. The SEC is kind of sticking their fingers in the wind saying, well, whatever works for us, we'll take it. And the Big Ten is pretty staunch on the 4+4+2+2+1.
Yep.
And I analyzed all the numbers, and it's kind of funny that with the current alignment, the Big 12 actually would have gained a couple of seats had it been the 4-4-2-2 versus the open forum. Like last year, they would only had one team in versus 2, but then there's it goes all the way back and forth. What have you thought? What's West Virginia fans think?
I started off really passionate on the 5+11 model side. I was like, we've got to do this because, the former athlete in me, the guy who loves competition. I'm like, man, that's the only way to do it. It's fair, it's equitable, or at least somewhat equitable, right? At least it appears equitable, I guess. But you're earning it on the field. That was my thinking. We've got to. You can't just give people bids. You can't. To me, that just flies in the face of what competition's all about. And I was staunchly on that side. But over time, and listening to more and more, I read your article. I listened to other podcasters. I read other articles. And I'm like, you know what? When you look at the numbers and when you look at what's actually best for the Big 12, take all the other things out of it. Take away the competitiveness, take away the what's best for the game, and just look strictly at what's best for the Big 12. I actually think the 4-4-2-2-1 model is the best for the conference, to be honest with you, long term. But as long as it's not permanent, if it's permanent and they lock it in for a long period of time, then I'm not for it. But if they do it and say, well, we have a look in 3 years, or we have a chance to go back and readjust or reevaluate it, then I think the 4-4-2-2-1 is the best for the conference. I've actually kind of come around and changed my opinion on that one. But I think they're both terrible for the conference. Overall, they're both terrible. Yeah. There's not really because of 5-11, you're just going to get 6 or 7 SEC teams every year because they're going to cram this strength of schedule model down everybody's throat and get their way. So it's either way, it's going to suck. But I think the lesser of two evils is the 4-4-2-2-1.
I think you it's like laying up on the golf course. It's like, I want to swing for the green, but sometimes you got to lay up. And I think that's probably for the Big 12 is take your two. Just take it. And what I would do, frankly, if I'm the ACC and Big 12, I think they need to really work together on this. And my recommendation would be, why don't we go forward and say, we'll be okay with this, but we've got to combine for 5 bids, which means we each get guaranteed 2, and then the next highest ranked team automatically qualifies. So you might be the 18th team combined, but you automatically get in. And I think the other leagues would probably be okay with that if that's your negotiating point. Because my fear for the Big 12 is, and like, let's say Iowa State and Kansas State and BYU and Texas Tech, they're all like 10-2 type of teams, kind of like scenario last year. And then you've got some 9-3 teams in the Big 10 or 9-3 teams in the SEC. I mean, look at the fit that the SEC teams pitched last year with Alabama and Ole Miss and South Carolina all being 9-3, but we play in the SEC and we beat these teams and we're 9-3. I mean, poor SMU loses on a field goal after going undefeated in the regular season, and it was a whisker away from losing its opportunity there. And if it would have been 10-2, it probably would have. Yep. And so my fear is you get to the Big 12 championship and it's 10-2 Kansas State, 10-2 Texas Tech, and you got another 10-2 team that didn't qualify. Then all of a sudden one of them blows out the other. K-State blows out. They go to the playoff, and then it's like, well, we wouldn't have gotten blown out in that game. And then the other team's 10-2, but look who we played in the Big 10. And then it becomes a contest. And Tony Bettini said he's worried about the selection committee. But if I'm the Big 12, I'm like, yeah, I worry about if Iowa State was going up against Michigan. Yep. If you're 10-2 and they're 9-3, and they beat XYZ and they, it's hard to win, especially Alabama, that type of thing. So, if I were the Big 12 and I were the ACC, to protect what's yours, say, sure, we'll take the 2, but we think that a third should be guaranteed between our leagues.
That's actually my preferred model too. And I was under the impression, I don't remember who wrote this, Scott, but I don't know if it was someone at the Athletic or one of your, someone else, but someone actually said that model had been floated. Well, Tony Petitti said it had not been presented to him. So I'm not sure. Somebody leaked it, maybe to see what perception was of it. I actually think that's a way you get your guaranteed 2, but then you have a chance at a third one every year. To me, that's the home run scenario to me for the Big 12 and the ACC. I'm not sure if I'm the ACC though. And again, I'm a little bit biased against the ACC because of the way they've treated West Virginia over the years, so you may forgive me. But they probably look at themselves as being above the Big 12, and they don't want to put themselves on equal footing to the Big 12. That's kind of a theory I have, but I could be completely wrong on that.
I think that it's you can make I could go back and forth. Clemson is clearly the number 1 team in both. Florida State probably is as well, even though it's been really inconsistent.
I would agree with that.
Outside of those 2, the Big 12 is the better league in football. It's more competitive. The floor is higher. There's more passionate spread across. I mean, in the ACC, you can have games where there's like 15,000 people there sometimes. And we won't have that in the Big 12. And you're going to have this. I think that it's going to be a more competitive league, but of course, Clemson and Florida State kind of skew it. But I think you do it out of protection. And I don't think Jim Phillips is a bad guy with this. I understand the thought of let's be competitive, 5+11. Let's make sure that, the best teams are in there. But then you're saying that, and then you're throwing it into a subjective pool. And not everybody from the Big 10, not everybody from the SEC, not even for the other 2 leagues either, play each other. And so then you're being subjected to, take Iowa this year. They play Iowa State, they play Indiana, they play Oregon and Penn State, all which had 11+ wins. If they go 9-3 or 10-2, but don't go to the championship game, that's a pretty good record. Whereas you look at I'll use Indiana last year, even though it's kind of an unfair comparison because they did beat both championship participants the year before and then lost to the ones who won it last year. But still, outside of that, their schedule was pretty soft. And in talking to Big Ten people about why they want to do like this weekend of games, and I think everybody will probably end up doing it just because it'll make some money.
Right.
But it's like, look at Indiana last year. We think they were good, but they were 8-1, and Illinois was 6-3. They lost to Penn State. They got blown out by Oregon, and then they lost to Minnesota, which won 8 games. So it was pretty good. Who was better? We don't really know. The schedules are different, so let's get a chance to compete because of that. And I think the SEC will do the same. And you just want to make sure that, So I kind of get it from Tony Petit's point of view. Is like, we're going to get 4 teams probably anyway. We just want to be the ones to decide it rather than have somebody else, an AD from Texas Tech or Oregon State or whatever, look at it and go, yeah, we should have that, that team, even though everybody's going, they're not as good as this one. And just leave it up to just that at-large 2 or 3 spots.
And I can't help but wonder and I know Tony Petit is doing what he thinks is best for the Big Ten, but there's a part of me that wonders if he sees the propaganda that Greg Sankey's pushing out there, and he feels like he's actually protecting everyone else from him or from the SEC to a degree. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's too pie in the sky, but I don't know. Maybe he feels like he's trying to look out for everybody, and in addition to doing what's best for the Big Ten, and at the same time with that move.
Yeah, his problem has been he just hasn't been out there. You look at like in May, and Brett Yermark's talking and says, Jim Phillips is talking, and then Sankey and everybody in the SEC is chirping, and the Big Ten says nothing and doesn't want to say anything. And I understand they just want to work at it behind the scenes. But again, perception matters in this league, in this sport, and what people think of you is how things are going to go. And you look at they had a lot of swagger. If you wanted to look back a few months ago, they won second straight national title. They had a killer bowl record. They've did a lot of really good things. They could have walked around and strutted a bit. Instead, they were very quiet, which you can say, well, good for them for being humble, but they're really not. But at this point, it's like they've lost control of their narrative.
The narrative,
and it matters. And Greg Sankey's been able to seize that, and I think that it's going to be hard for them to recapture it because the public looks at it as you're just doing this you're self-serving and arrogant. And frankly, maybe it may look that way. It's not the reason, but that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And again, perception matters.
Right. Yeah, very well said. One more quick question for you, Scott, and I'll let you out of here, man. Back to the rivalry conversation. It's something I forgot to ask you, but I've got to ask you. I live in the southern part of West Virginia, so I'm 3.5 hours actually south of Morgantown.
Okay.
But I'm very close. I'm only an hour from Blacksburg, Virginia, where I live. So the Virginia Tech West Virginia rivalry where I live is actually arguably bigger than the Pitt rivalry here locally, because there are a lot of Virginia Tech fans who live in this area. Was that one of the rivalries you researched during your exercise? Was the Black Diamond Trophy game between Virginia Tech and West Virginia?
Yeah, and I just wish they would have played more, and it just is faded. That's one that I remember one game. You could correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember Michael Vick playing, and it was just this really wide open game, probably about 25 years ago to date myself here, but and it seemed like it was a natural rivalry. Even dare say, and you correct me if you're wrong, but it seemed like it's more natural between those two than say Virginia Tech, Virginia, which seems a little more
forced.
Yeah. They're the same state, but otherwise,
I think that's fair to say. But again, I'm coming at it from I don't know the UVA side of it, so it's hard for me to speculate. But I think so. I think it's more heated.
Yeah, UVA is probably more North Carolina, Maryland before Maryland left. That was a really big rivalry. I had that on the list, but yeah, I would have liked to have seen that one too. And again, speaking from outside the area, it just seems like it would have made so much sense for West Virginia to go to the ACC just competitively, regionally, especially now having Pitt in there, but having, all those teams, it'd be easy travel. And it's just kind of unfortunate. You've got to be that outlier geographically.
Yeah.
But that would have been a nice one. I think I mentioned Syracuse was one that
Yep.
I looked
The
at.
Schwartzwalder Trophy.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
And Penn State to a degree, but that was
Yeah, that's been a very one-sided affair, unfortunately. But I do appreciate the fact that you put the Cincinnati game, potential Cincinnati rivalry.
yeah,
I do think that could potentially turn into something if the games become. Right now, West Virginia's sort of owned it, but I
yeah.
think Cincinnati's on the rise, or has the potential to be on the rise, depending on what they do this year. So I do think it has the makings, and they've had some close games over the years when they were both in the Big East together.
Mhm.
I think they even shared a Big East title a time or two. So there's been some really good games, and regionally it just makes sense for those two to. I was upset when the Big 12 came out with their football scheduling for the next 4 years and
Yeah,
didn't have those two playing every year. I thought that was a missed opportunity.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I think the Big 12, they need to take a step back. I understand kind of what they're trying to do. They're saying there's only 4 permanent rivalries in the Big
Mm-hmm.
12. Baylor, TCU, okay, we get it. Arizona State, the Holy War, of course, and then the Sunflower Showdown or whatever between Kansas and Kansas State. But there are a few that, this is one that makes sense. I mean, travel is something that, I know it's from what, a lot of friends of mine who covered Iowa State and would go,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, that's one of the things they talk about the most. And if you got a chance to be within 5 hours probably of a drive, that it's really helpful for, those types of teams to
Mm-hmm.
play together. And what I wrote was, they were together for 7 years in the Big East, and West Virginia leads overall 18-3-1. But and back in the Big East days, though, Cincinnati was just coming into it, so
Correct.
it's kind of like they're like the new kid. And you're like, yeah, but we already got our rivals over here. We don't really need you. But now you're in this together, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, hey, you wanna go to lunch?
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Play twice every year in basketball. Play football every year. Get that going. And they also need to protect Farmageddon because it has been played every year since it started in 1917, every single year, and it's due to rotate off in 2027. That's something they got to get corrected, in my opinion. But
Yeah, I agree. I thought I do think that's something the Big 12 is. I've agreed with most of the things Brett Yormark has done.
mm-hmm.
That's one I thought he missed on a little bit, was trying to promote rivalries a little better. I think they went the route of everybody playing everybody as much as possible versus familiarity. And I think, my opinion, that's a little bit of a mistake. But
Yeah.
again, what do I know? I don't make $3 million a year or whatever the number is. But anyway,
Yeah.
well, Scott, real quick, man, let everybody know where they can find you and your work, and I'll let you out of here.
I'm sure a lot of you found me on Twitter at Scott Dochterman today. But that's fine. I like hearing from you, and as long as we have rational discussion, I'm all about it. It's just and the other times I have talked to one of the games I put in for was the Backyard Brawl, which was actually before this, but it was one that I said I thought it had 3 really good thoughts in my mind, which is, one, is this the course that rivalries can take, should take, which is playing 8 over 11 years, I think is but there's a 3-year gap here starting this year. Should a rivalry like this push through and try to make it happen a little bit more? And then also beyond that is, what's Rich Rod's momentum like? And what about Eli Holstein? Is he, he's highly thought of, and maybe he's got a chance to do something. So that's one that we've discussed. It hasn't gotten anywhere yet, but I would love to do it. And as long as nobody takes a swing at me, I'd like to walk through the parking lot and say hi to people and maybe take a drink.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, it'll be fun. And, hopefully a ton of people have seen your face now, but maybe not. I don't know. Who knows how many is going to watch this, but for those of you watching, for those of you listening, by the way, on audio only, it's Scott Dochterman on X. It's Dochterman on X. Look him up if you want to, be politely engage with him on X. No, nothing crazy, please. But represent West Virginia and the fan base well, please. And for that matter, if there are any Pitt fans watching, they might want to chime in as well. But yeah, Scott, I really appreciate you coming on the show. You do great work over at The Athletic. And again, just thanks for all you do covering college football and college sports.
Thanks for having me on. It's been great to talk to you. I love talking to people all over the country just because there are different perspectives that you don't know. And I think as college football fans, and I'm a fan as much as I am a reporter, you want to understand people better. So when I do a series like this, that what you say and what I've asked other people about, it's like, okay, that's something I need to think about. Because if there was one that I look back now that I'm like, probably should have tweaked it, it's probably the Arizona State one. That probably should have jumped up a little bit. I'm not saying it could have been anything more than like 40, but but anyway, that's everybody's got great perspective, and
yeah. I mean, I guess the only thing I would have probably asked you to do differently, but again, I don't know how you measure it, is try to take the fan passion piece maybe into. But again, I don't know how you do that from an analytical view. It's hard to do that without just being subjective. And I know you were trying to do this without too much subjectivity.
Yeah, and again, it's like, how do I judge the passion for the Backyard Brawl versus the passion for the Holy War versus the passion for the Cyhawk, or Auburn, Alabama, which is
fair,
and then Michigan, Ohio State, which is one of these days it's gonna get worse than it did last year. How's that? I don't know. Michigan State is just insane. So I try to say they're all pretty passionate. And we have a lot of stories this week. This is just first day. One of them is on Chris Vanini is writing, is just about nicknames, rivalry nicknames, the names of the games.
That's cool. So, that'll be fun.
There's all kinds of them. Even some that didn't make my list that are really in there. And what is the slab of ribs or something like that? Memphis and UAB and the Backyard Brawl and Brawl of the Wild between Montana and Montana State. There's some really great ones out there.
Yep. All right. Well, listen, Scott, thank you again, and appreciate it. And you have a good rest of your night.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Take care. Yes, sir.